He knelt alone in the dim room, the weight of the world pressing down on his shoulders, and he wondered how it had come to this. The rain tapped softly against the window, a rhythm like a heartbeat, like the steady drum of life that continued outside even when he felt all but abandoned. The walls seemed closer than usual, the shadows longer, darker, as if they leaned in to remind him of every failure he had endured, every hope he had lost, every dream that had slipped through his fingers. In the quiet of the night, his mind raced, a storm louder than the one outside, whispering doubts, fears, accusations, the kind that gnaw quietly at the soul until one wonders if anything good remains at all. And yet, even in the depth of despair, there lingered a single fragile ember of thought, a memory of words long forgotten yet insistent. "Do not fear, for I am with you." The words came back softly, not as a command, not as a comfort demanded, but as a gentle reminder that perhaps, even here, there was still a presence unseen but not absent. He exhaled slowly, letting the tension seep from his shoulders, yet the weight in his chest did not fully lift. How could it? For years he had carried more than anyone could see. He had walked paths of uncertainty, walked streets of disappointment, and yet in the secret chambers of his heart he had held on, often without realizing it, to a hope that now seemed tenuous at best. His life had not been easy, nor had it been fair. He had loved and lost. He had given and been left wanting. He had trusted and been betrayed. And now, in the stillness of this night, alone with nothing but his own thoughts, he asked himself a question that he had been avoiding for years. Do I still have faith? Do I still believe that I am not alone in this struggle? As the rain fell harder, tapping against the glass with a sharper rhythm, he thought of the stories he had once heard as a child. Stories of men and women of faith, ordinary souls called to extraordinary challenges, who faced trials that seemed insurmountable and yet, through trust, through surrender, through belief, emerged victorious. He had always loved these stories, found comfort in their certainty, and yet now the words seemed almost foreign. Could they be true? Could the same unseen hand that had guided others be watching, guiding, sustaining him in this hour of need? His heart wavered, pulled between doubt and longing, between fear and the faintest glimmer of hope. In the quiet, he began to reflect on the moments that had led him here, tracing each decision, each step, each choice that had brought him to this room on this night. It was not a dramatic tale of heroism. It was life. And life, he knew, was often quiet in its battles. The victories were rarely announced with trumpets. The defeats rarely mourned with the ceremony they deserved. Most of the time, life's struggles were silent, solitary, intimate, demanding courage in the unseen corners of the soul. He remembered the faces of those he had loved and lost, the mistakes he had made, the opportunities he had let pass. And yet, even in that reflection, he sensed a strange and persistent thing. He was still here. He was still breathing. The heart still beat. And in that simple fact alone, he found the smallest hint of strength, a fragile whisper of resilience that refused to die. Slowly, he bowed his head further, and in the dim light of the room, he began to pray. Not in ceremony, not with expectation of grandeur, but in the raw simplicity of a man confronting his own weakness and reaching beyond it. "Lord," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the rain, "I cannot do this alone. I am not enough. I am weary, I am broken, I am frightened. And yet I come to you, because you are the one who sees, who knows, who carries what I cannot bear." The words trembled as they left his lips, not from fear of speaking them, but from the enormity of what they implied. To surrender completely is to expose oneself utterly, and he had done that. Every thought, every hidden fear, every secret regret laid bare before a presence unseen. And in that act, he felt a stirring subtle at first, like the brush of a feather across the soul, a reminder that perhaps the prayer itself was not the act of weakness he had feared, but a turning point, a beginning. Minutes stretched into hours as he remained there, kneeling in silence, listening not for answers, but for reassurance, for presence, for the quiet affirmation that he was not alone. The storm outside rose and fell, mirroring the tumult within him. He reflected on the times he had faced challenges, large and small, and yet found that even when all seemed lost, guidance had appeared. Sometimes in people, sometimes in events, sometimes in moments so subtle he had almost missed them. He realized that perhaps life was less about the battles that could be seen, and more about the courage to continue when nothing is visible, when hope seems faint, when the mind insists there is no way forward. It was here, in the unseen, that faith took root, quietly but firmly, shaping the soul in ways the world could not measure. And so he remained, the night stretching endlessly, the rain a companion rather than a torment. In this stillness, he felt a transformation begin, imperceptible yet profound. The doubts did not vanish, the fears did not disappear, but they lost their dominion. He had acknowledged them, confronted them, and in doing so, he discovered something remarkable. Surrender was not defeat. Surrender was a form of strength, a recognition that he did not carry the burden alone, that even in weakness, he could touch the infinite, even if only through the simple act of opening his heart. Hours passed, and in the quiet, he began to feel a subtle courage stirring. A resolve not born of pride or self-reliance, but of trust. Trust that though the night was dark, dawn would come. Trust that though his path had been uncertain, guidance existed. Trust that though the weight of life pressed upon him, he was not abandoned. And in that quiet trust, he found a strange exhilaration, a peace that was not the absence of struggle, but the presence of something far greater than struggle itself. By the time the storm outside began to wane, he had moved from trembling to steady, from doubt to tentative hope, from despair to a recognition that even here, even now, he was part of a larger story, a story he could not fully see but could participate in through faith, through prayer, through openness of heart. The room, once oppressive and dark, now felt like a sanctuary, a place where the unseen and the seen met, where vulnerability became courage, and where the faintest spark of hope could illuminate the entire soul. And so he rose slowly, knees stiff, back aching, heart still heavy but no longer crushed. He carried the knowledge that he had not defeated all his struggles. Far from it, but he had faced the greatest battle of all, the battle within. And in the quiet aftermath of this night, he understood something essential. The power of a single prayer, spoken with sincerity and humility, was a sword forged in the unseen, a weapon stronger than fear, sharper than doubt, and capable of piercing the darkness that surrounded him. The first part of his journey had ended, not with fanfare, but with a profound, unshakable awareness. He was not alone, he was not powerless, and the battle, though far from over, could be met with courage, faith, and trust that what he had begun in the silence would carry him forward into the light. The days following that night were quiet, yet charged with a sense he could not explain. Though the world moved as it always had, he felt something stirring deep within, a subtle awakening like the first hints of sunlight before dawn. His mind returned to that moment of prayer, the whispered words that had trembled on his lips, and he realized that prayer was not simply speaking into the void, but opening one's heart to the unseen, trusting in a power far beyond comprehension. He recalled the words of Philippians 4 verse 13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And suddenly, what had felt impossible began to carry a subtle weight of possibility, a quiet but undeniable promise that he was not alone. As he walked through his day, the ordinary world seemed different. A leaf fluttered in the wind, a distant bird called across the sky, the sunlight danced across a window in a way that made him pause. Every small moment became a reminder that creation itself bore witness to what could not be seen. And in these ordinary signs, he sensed a presence, constant and unyielding, that had been with him all along. He thought again of Isaiah 41 verse 10. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, I will help you, I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. The words echoed not as instruction, but as comfort, a firm foundation beneath the shifting sands of his uncertainty. That evening, he returned to the quiet room where he had knelt days before. He did not kneel this time with desperation, but with intention. He closed his eyes and allowed the stillness to fill him. Thoughts of failure arose as they always did, but he met each one with a gentle acknowledgement. "Yes, I see you. You are real. But you are not my master." And he let the words of Psalm 34 verses 17 to 18 wash over him. When the righteous cry for help, the Lord hears and delivers them out of all their troubles. The Lord is near to the broken-hearted and saves the crushed in spirit. With each breath, he imagined the heaviness lifting, shadows receding, and an invisible warmth surrounding him. Prayer became less about asking and more about listening. The silence was no longer empty. It was full of presence. He felt drawn into reflection, remembering the times in his life when answers had come in ways so subtle he had almost missed them. A sudden encounter with a stranger, a word of encouragement from someone unexpected, a coincidence that felt too perfect to be mere chance. All of these moments now took on new meaning. They were threads, weaving a tapestry of care, proof that unseen hands guided even the smallest details. "Even when I cannot see, you are with me," he whispered, a mantra as much as a prayer, repeating it again and again, feeling its truth embed itself deeper with each repetition. The room seemed to breathe with him. Shadows still lingered in corners, but they no longer intimidated him. The fear that had once paralyzed his heart began to dissolve under the quiet persistence of faith. He remembered the story of David and Goliath, how the boy with no armor had faced a giant, not relying on his own might, but on God's power. He realized that his life, though not as epic in the world's eyes, mirrored the same principle. The unseen support of the Almighty could turn even the smallest act of trust into something powerful, something transformative. And in that awareness, he felt the first stirrings of courage, a soft but undeniable affirmation that the prayer he had whispered was beginning to shape reality itself. Hours passed, though he felt no concept of time. He reflected on John 15 verse 7. "If you abide in me, and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you." The verse was not a promise of instant miracles, but a reminder of connection, of alignment with the source of all power. He felt that connection now. His whispered prayer was no longer a plea born of weakness. It was a reaching forth into a living, breathing presence that met him where he was, exactly as he was, and lifted him in ways he could neither fully explain nor yet see. Outside, the storm had passed. A faint breeze stirred the curtains, carrying with it the scent of rain on earth, the smell of life renewed. And in that small act of nature, he recognized the metaphor of his own journey. The storms would come, but they would pass, leaving clarity, growth, and the possibility of transformation. Each whispered prayer was like a seed, planted in the fertile ground of his heart, and though the growth was invisible at first, it was happening nonetheless. He recalled Matthew 17 verse 20. "If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, nothing will be impossible for you." That seed, he realized, had been planted long ago, and tonight, nurtured by courage and trust, it began to sprout. He stayed in the quiet hours, speaking softly, thinking deeply, listening intently. He spoke words of gratitude, words of confession, words of hope. Each word seemed to resonate beyond the walls of the room, beyond the ceiling, beyond the night itself. And he sensed that the universe, or God, or both, was listening, absorbing, and responding, not with noise or fire, but with subtle guidance, gentle strength, and quiet empowerment. This was the lesson of prayer. It was not the demand of the will, but the surrender of it. Not the wielding of power, but the recognition of it already present, waiting to be embraced. By the time dawn approached, a profound sense of calm had settled over him. The trembling of the heart had quieted. The doubts had not vanished, but they no longer dominated. In their place was awareness. An awareness of presence, of possibility, of power beyond sight. The prayer he had whispered, sincere, humble, persistent, had begun to ripple through reality, not as a magic incantation, but as the alignment of soul with divine intent. And he knew, with a clarity he had never felt before, that the day was coming when that prayer, nurtured in patience and trust, would manifest in ways he could not yet imagine. He rose from his knees, stretching muscles stiffened by hours of reflection, and felt the first rays of sunlight warming his face. He breathed deeply, inhaling the scent of rain-soaked earth, the subtle sound of birds beginning their morning song, and in that moment, he felt a profound gratitude. He was still here. He was still capable. He was still heard. And the promise embedded in the sacred words he had reflected upon, Philippians, Isaiah, Psalms, John, was alive within him. That faith, even in its quietest form, could move the unseen, could transform weakness into strength, could turn the whisper of a heart into a force that shaped destiny. And so, he began his day, not with certainty of victory, but with certainty of guidance. Not with assurance of ease, but with assurance of presence. The prayer had stirred heaven. The journey had only begun. And in the stillness that remained, he carried a courage that was quiet, profound, and enduring. A courage born of trust, faith, and the knowledge that no heart that truly seeks will ever be unheard.
The days following his first true communion with the divine were calm on the surface, yet within him, the battle had only begun. The quiet he had felt was not the absence of struggle, but the prelude to it. He sensed forces at work beyond his comprehension, movements of circumstance, shifts in thought, stirrings in the soul that could not be explained by logic or reason alone. As he walked through the world, everything seemed familiar: streets, houses, faces, yet something had changed. Every shadow seemed to carry weight, every wind seemed to whisper questions. It was as though life itself was testing him, measuring the strength of the faith he had so recently begun to embrace. He recalled Ephesians 6 verse 12, which had long lingered in his mind, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." The verse was not just poetry or warning, it was reality, a map for the terrain he was navigating, invisible yet perilous. And he understood now, with a clarity born of experience, that the battles he had faced before were only shadows of this greater struggle, a fight not seen by eyes, not heard by ears, but lived in the depths of the heart. He could feel it. Moments of doubt rose, subtle and persistent, questioning the sincerity of his faith, the worthiness of his heart, the possibility that his prayers might go unanswered. Fear attempted to coil around him, whispering old insecurities, memories of past failures, of times when he had given his best and received nothing in return. Yet he remembered the words of 2 Corinthians 12 verse 9, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." And he realized, in that very instant, that the shadow could not overpower him unless he let it. Weakness was not the enemy, fear was not the enemy. They were merely tests, measurements of the courage he was learning to cultivate. And so he stood firm, not in arrogance, not in pride, but in quiet determination, anchored in prayer and trust. The invisible forces, whatever shape they took, could sense the resolve of a heart surrendered to the divine. He did not see angels descending or demons recoiling, not yet. But he felt the weight of their presence, subtle, like a vibration through the soul. Every moment, every breath became a battlefield, not fought with sword or shield, but with vigilance, reflection, and unwavering faith. The struggle was exhausting. Simple tasks felt heavier, conversations seemed to carry unspoken tension, even sleep was a battleground where dreams and fears collided. Yet amidst this internal storm, he noticed small victories. A moment of clarity where fear faltered. A quiet insight into a solution that had eluded him before. A soft voice inside, reminding him that he was not alone, that each trial was part of the refining process. Romans 8 verse 31 came to mind, "If God is for us, who can be against us?" And he repeated the words as a mantra, feeling them strengthen his spirit with every utterance. Each day, the invisible battle intensified in subtle ways. He encountered temptations of doubt, distractions of pride, whispers of resentment, and echoes of past regrets. Yet he approached each one with awareness, acknowledging their presence without yielding to them. He understood now that spiritual warfare was not about denying the darkness, but about recognizing it, confronting it, and refusing to let it define him. In those moments of confrontation, he discovered a quiet power that was not his own, but channeled through his faith, a power that rendered the invisible tangible in the soul. He would sit for hours in contemplation, reflecting on the battles of biblical figures, David facing Goliath with nothing but a sling, Daniel walking into the lion's den with nothing but trust, the apostles confronting persecution with unwavering faith. Their struggles were not unlike his, though grander in scale. Yet the principle was the same: the unseen hand of God supports the heart that trusts, even when sight and logic insist that defeat is inevitable. And in this realization, he found encouragement. His own struggles were smaller, perhaps, but no less significant in the shaping of his spirit. Time blurred as he moved through his days, the invisible conflict ever present. At times he felt weary, almost overwhelmed, yet he reminded himself of James 1 verse 12, "Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because, having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him." And he clung to the promise, feeling the words not just in his mind, but in the sinews of his heart, grounding him, steadying him, giving him reason to continue even when the battle seemed endless. He became attuned to the subtle cues of the world around him, a tone of voice that could ignite frustration or compassion, a glance that could carry misunderstanding or encouragement, the timing of events that seemed coincidental yet meaningful. Every interaction became an opportunity to exercise patience, forgiveness, discernment, and faith. The invisible forces did not announce themselves with drums or lightning. They whispered, nudged, and tested, and in responding with grace and awareness, he discovered that the sword he wielded was not made of steel, but of the principles he embodied: courage, perseverance, humility, and trust. Days turned into nights, nights into days, and the battle persisted. Yet he noticed a subtle shift. Where once fear had dominated, there was now caution tempered by confidence. Where doubt had once whispered, there was now reflection strengthened by prayer. Where despair had once lingered, there was now a sense of purpose, faint but undeniable. He remembered Psalm 18 verse 39, "For you equipped me with strength for the battle, you made those who rise against me sink under me." The verse did not promise the absence of struggle, but it promised presence, equipping, and a victory that would unfold according to divine timing. In these hours of contemplation, he realized that the invisible battle was not meant to break him, but to awaken him. To show him that the power he sought was not outside, but within, mediated through trust in the Almighty. He saw that prayer, reflection, discernment, and surrender were not passive acts, but weapons, tools of engagement in a war that was spiritual, subtle, and profound. And with this understanding, he began to move with intentionality, speaking gently, acting wisely, thinking deeply, living deliberately, every step a response to the unseen forces around him. By the time the day gave way to evening, he was exhausted but strengthened. The invisible battle had not ceased, nor would it ever fully disappear. But he had learned its rhythm, sensed its purpose, and discovered the power that could meet it. His heart was steady, his mind alert, his spirit anchored. And he whispered once again, a quiet affirmation of the truth he had come to embrace: that the unseen could be confronted, that faith could be weaponized, that prayer could shape the intangible into strength, and that no darkness, no fear, no trial could prevail against a heart fully surrendered and fully aligned with the divine.
The days of struggle, of unseen battles, of wrestling with fear and doubt, had prepared him for this moment. A moment he did not expect, a moment he did not seek, yet a moment he had been moving toward all along. The air around him seemed heavier, not oppressive, but charged, as if the world itself were holding its breath in anticipation. Every step he took, every breath he drew, carried the weight of purpose, the invisible gravity of unseen forces. And in that weight, he felt a quiet stirring, a sense of alignment with something far greater than himself. He remembered Hebrews 4 verse 12. "For the word of God is living and active, sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing to the division of soul and spirit, of joints and marrow, and discerning the thoughts and intentions of the heart." Those words had always resonated, but now they came alive in his heart. The sword of the Lord was not something he would wield in the world of men, but within, in the unseen, in the depths of spirit and intention. And as he breathed, as he whispered another prayer, simple, humble, unadorned, he felt it manifest. The first sign was subtle, a warmth in his chest, spreading outward, gentle but insistent. It was not a sensation of heat, but of power, of presence, of alignment. Then the light began. Not blinding, not sharp at first, but steady, radiant, emanating from his very being. It seemed to respond to the purity of his intent, to the depth of his surrender, to the sincerity of his trust. And in that light he felt the sword. Not a weapon of iron or steel, but of faith itself. Sharp, unyielding, unbreakable, a manifestation of prayer given form and substance by the one who listens and answers. He raised his hands slightly, and the light extended, stretching into a shape that his eyes could perceive only partially, for it was neither wholly material nor wholly immaterial. It was a sword of the spirit, and yet it was real enough to feel its weight, its purpose, its power. Shadows that had lingered in the corners of his heart, doubts that had whispered in the quiet, fears that had pressed upon him, all recoiled from this force. It did not strike with violence. It did not need to. Its presence alone reshaped the space, demanded attention, and imposed order where chaos had once prevailed. He thought of Psalm 91 verse 4. He will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness will be your shield and rampart. The sword and the shield were not separate. The power he wielded in that moment came from surrender, from humility, from alignment with divine will. And he realized that this sword, this manifestation of prayer and faith, was not meant to harm, but to defend, to clarify, to cut away the darkness and leave truth in its place. Time seemed to stretch. Each breath, each heartbeat, each whisper of intention sent ripples through his being. He closed his eyes, recalling every trial, every moment of despair, every moment of courage he had gathered, and he felt the culmination of all of it in his chest. A concentrated, radiant force that was him, yet greater than him, yet inseparable from the divine. He whispered once again, and the sword shimmered brighter, its edge glinting with the purity of faith, of hope, of surrender. The invisible battle that had raged around him seemed to pause, as if acknowledging the emergence of a force it could not diminish. Every doubt, every fear, every shadow of hesitation encountered the sword of prayer and receded. He did not need to strike. The sword existed as a statement, a symbol, a manifestation of spiritual truth, that the faithful heart, aligned with the divine, possesses a power beyond comprehension. And in this realization, he felt a profound joy, a profound peace, and a profound courage. Romans 8 verse 37 echoed in his mind. No, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. He was a conqueror not because he had forced victory, but because he had opened his heart fully, surrendered fully, trusted fully, and allowed the unseen hand to work through him. Hours passed in this state of presence, and yet he felt no exhaustion. The sword remained, not as an object, but as a living energy, responding to his intent, his faith, his prayer. He sensed the alignment of his life, the interweaving of events, encounters, and moments that had guided him to this point. Every trial had prepared him, every fear had strengthened him, every prayer had been a stitch in the tapestry of this manifestation. As night approached, the sword's light softened, becoming a gentle glow that warmed his heart rather than blinding his eyes. He understood, with a clarity that transcended language, that the sword was not for spectacle. It was a tool of discernment, a manifestation of inner alignment, a proof that prayer, sincere and persistent, has the capacity to create power in the unseen realm. He reflected on 2 Timothy 2 verses 3-4. Share in suffering as a good soldier of Christ Jesus. No soldier gets entangled in civilian pursuits, since his aim is to please the one who enlisted him. His aim had been simple: to seek alignment, to trust, to surrender. The sword was the confirmation that his aim had been true, and that the divine had met him in his humility and obedience. He breathed deeply, letting the realization wash over him. The sword was not a symbol of victory over others, but a symbol of victory over fear, over doubt, over despair. It was the tangible outcome of a heart that had dared to believe, that had dared to surrender, that had dared to persevere. And in that awareness, he felt the culmination of his journey thus far, a peace that was not the absence of challenge, but the presence of divine empowerment, a courage that was not of his own making, but of God working through him, a clarity that was not given but recognized. As the night deepened, he stood, feeling the sword of prayer within him, a living emblem of faith, a guide for the battles yet to come. He whispered once more, softly, humbly, yet with certainty, I am not alone. I am heard. I am equipped. I am ready. And in that quiet affirmation, he understood something profound. The power of prayer is not measured in noise or spectacle or force, but in alignment with the divine, in courage born of surrender, in the steadfastness of a heart that refuses to yield. The sword of prayer was his, yet it belonged also to something far greater than himself. A tool, a light, a manifestation of faith that would shape the unseen and transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. Morning arrived softly, almost imperceptibly, as though the world itself was hesitant to break the spell of the night. Yet even in the gentle light, he could feel the weight of the hours he had spent in prayer, in reflection, in confrontation with the unseen forces that had tested his soul. The sword of prayer, which had been a brilliant, radiant force in the night, had now softened to a quiet glow within him, not diminished, but internalized, a presence he could carry with him into every moment, every breath, every choice. He walked slowly through his room, feeling the residual warmth of faith in every fiber of his being. The trials of the past days and nights were not erased. They lingered as reminders of the journey he had undertaken, the courage he had summoned, the surrender he had embraced. Yet the fear that had once paralyzed him, the doubts that had once clawed at his heart, had receded. They had not disappeared entirely, for even the faithful face new trials, but they had lost their dominion. He felt free in a way he had not known before. Free because he had discovered that true strength lies not in self-reliance, but in trust, not in conquest, but in surrender, not in the absence of struggle, but in the presence of divine accompaniment. He recalled Isaiah 40 verse 31. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. And he felt it, not as abstract words, but as reality flowing through him. His strength was renewed, not from his own efforts, but from the invisible current of grace that had carried him through the storm, that had transformed prayer into a sword, doubt into courage, despair into hope. He understood now that every whispered prayer, every moment of quiet surrender, every act of faith, had been shaping him into a vessel capable of holding the divine presence. He stepped outside into the morning light, letting the sun warm his face. The air was fresh, the world alive with sound and color that he had not fully noticed before. Birds sang their morning songs, the breeze stirred the trees, and even the remnants of the night's storm, wet earth, glistening leaves, the distant drip of rain, seemed to sing a hymn of renewal. He realized that the world itself reflected the transformation he had experienced within. The chaos of the night had passed, leaving clarity, beauty, and the gentle assurance of continuity. In this quiet, sacred moment, he thought of Romans 15 verse 13. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. And he felt that overflowing, subtle yet undeniable. Hope was no longer an abstract concept. It was a living current coursing through him, a tangible companion in every thought, every intention, every heartbeat. He breathed deeply, sensing that peace was not merely the absence of struggle, but the presence of divine alignment. He reflected on the journey that had brought him here, the night of despair, the whispered prayer, the invisible battles that had tested him, the sword of prayer that had emerged from faith itself. Each stage had been necessary, each challenge a teacher, each fear a measure of the courage he had now discovered. He realized that the battles he faced would never truly end. Life would continue to test, to provoke, to stretch him, but he had been equipped, not with weapons of this world, but with tools of the Spirit. Trust, surrender, perseverance, and the abiding presence of God in his heart. Sitting quietly, he let memories of the journey wash over him. He saw every doubt he had faced as a shadow that had passed away in the light of faith. Every moment of fear had been a spark igniting courage. Every tear had watered the soil in which hope could grow. And he recognized the profound truth of Psalm 23 verse 4. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. The valley had been real, the shadows had been real, but he had walked through them. He had emerged not unscathed, but strengthened, not untested, but victorious in the sense that truly matters. Victorious in spirit. The sun climbed higher, and he felt the warmth on his skin like a tangible reminder of the divine's constant presence. He walked slowly, intentionally, appreciating every detail. The sound of leaves rustling, the feel of the breeze, the small beauty in the world that is often overlooked when fear dominates the heart. Gratitude filled him. Not a fleeting emotion, but a deep, abiding awareness that even the smallest moments are infused with significance when one's heart is aligned with God. And in this awareness he spoke quietly, humbly, but with certainty. I am here. I am alive. I am strengthened. I am guided. I am not alone. The words were not a declaration of conquest over the world, but a recognition of the victory already present in his heart. The sword of prayer still rested within him, not as a weapon for battle against others, but as a symbol of triumph over fear, over doubt, over despair. It was proof that faith, persistent and humble, can transform the unseen into power, weakness into strength, and vulnerability into courage. He thought of the future with calm anticipation. The challenges would come as they always do. The storms would rise again, shadows would gather, doubts would whisper. But he now carried something no external force could take. A heart rooted in trust, a spirit armed with surrender, a soul fortified by prayer. Every obstacle would be met not with fear, but with the quiet, unshakable confidence that comes from knowing the divine is present, guiding, and working all things for good. As he closed his eyes once more, he reflected on the entire journey. The night of despair, the hours of prayer, the unseen battles, the emergence of the sword, and the dawn of peace. Each step, each struggle, each whisper of faith had been necessary. And now, at last, he felt the culmination. A serene, enduring peace, the kind that persists even when life's trials return, the kind that flows from alignment with God, the kind that transforms ordinary life into a landscape of grace. And so, he stood in the full light of day, a soul renewed, a heart emboldened, a spirit at rest. The journey was not over, it would never be over, but he had learned the most vital lesson, that the power of prayer, the strength of faith, the courage of surrender, and the peace of trust could turn every shadow into light, every fear into fortitude, and every whisper into a sword capable of piercing the darkness of the heart. He was no longer the man who had knelt alone in despair. He was a vessel of divine purpose, a participant in the unseen, a testament to the enduring power of hope, faith, and love. And in that quiet, sacred presence, he smiled, knowing that the storms of life might continue, but the peace of God, the peace that surpasses understanding, would forever walk with him, guide him, and sustain him. The day had come full circle. The prayer had been answered. The sword had been forged. The soul had been strengthened. And the world, though unchanged in appearance, had been transformed forever within him.